Hi, I'm Danny Ramos, and welcome to this week's edition of Hispanic Speak Out TV, brought to you every Tuesday on Bright House Cable, Channel 49 at 9:30 p.m. We have a very interesting personality with us. He's been in the community a real long time, and he's one of the most outstanding leaders of the Hispanic community in general, but certainly he's Puerto Rican, of the Puerto Rican community. His name is Tony Suarez, extremely well-known attorney. Tony, welcome again to Hispanic Speak Out TV. How are you?
Thank you, Danny. Thanks once again for the invitation and staying healthy, which is what I try to do at this stage of my life.
You had an operation on your foot. That's all done and gone?
That's all done. I'm able to get on a treadmill, do some swimming, and I've lost some weight and feeling good.
Good. You know, whenever I want to know what's going on in the community, I always tap into you, you know, because you're kind of like it's like seeing the top of the ocean. You want to look a little 6 feet down, you know, and get a view of really what's going on. And you're the kind of guy that's always involved and know what's going on in all the community organizations, in all the legal aspects. Right. So I wanted to touch upon a couple of things with you today that you're very involved in. Number one, the Mildred Fernandez case. Number two, the redistricting of which is going to have an effect on all Hispanics when it comes to voting. Okay, right. And also the Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce, which is you have a new life given to the Puerto Rican Chamber because the former president is out. And he kind of like had a hold on it, and it was more dictatorial relationship that he had than it was a board operating the chamber for the well-being of the Hispanic community. So let's start with the Puerto Rican Chamber.
All right.
Okay. Now I understand that you guys are kind of like setting up flagpoles like the United Nations.
Right. What we're trying to do, Danny, is, as you know, you've been to my offices. I own, fortunate enough to own 2 buildings downtown Orlando, right on State Road 50, which over the years have been converted into a colonial plaza, Spanish plaza type place with the fence.
Yeah, you've done that.
I've done that on my own.
Yeah.
And then it so happens that the Puerto Rican Chamber starts up again, and they need the home. I happen to have the extra space. It's a perfect match, you know, the colonial style building in downtown Orlando. And so I've offered them the space to come on in. And we're going to put the big flagpoles in front of the building downtown.
How big is big?
Well, we're talking about 20-foot flagpoles, you know. Okay. So 3 20-foot flagpoles with 10-foot flags. So it should look like an embassy, which is what the event is. The effect is to make it look, and it's going to be very Spanish style. It'll be a perfect home for the Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce. Hopefully it'll be a new beginning because the Puerto Rican community needs that. As you know, it's 50% of the growth of the population in Central Florida is Hispanic, and most of that is Puerto Rican. So they have it coming from the island, and they have problems adjusting to both jurisdictional issues, political issues, language issues, cultural issues, and they need a place so they can meet. The changing of how to do zoning is very different here in Central Florida than it is on the island. So the Puerto Rican Chamber, I think, would have a very focused, a very specific job in helping that community, which is so vibrant and so big, 800,000 strong in Central
Almost
Florida.
like a consulate function.
Yeah, I think how the council function. Most Puerto Ricans that come from the island are coming here to start a new life, obviously. You know, they're changing from the island. They either start a new business or they're looking for some way to get into the lifestyle here. They need some sort of professional counseling. They'll need to know that you can't go just open up a store around here. You've got to have a zillion permits for everything you do. You know, so they need some counseling. I think that the chamber has that very specific goal. A lot of controversy as to whether the Puerto Rican Chamber do we need it when there's an Hispanic chamber? I think we do. The Hispanic Chamber has a different role. The Puerto Rican Chamber is very much more focused on the island traffic between this community. The Hispanic Chamber is much more global and in view.
There's always been, you know, going back many years, there's always been a major resistance by certain segments of the community for the formation of a Puerto Rican Chamber. There's always been a contrary move, a move against that, an actual orchestrated move to prevent Puerto Ricans from having their own chamber and organizing their own community. Why do you think that is?
Oh boy. I guess you like the can of worms. Listen, I'm going to put it this way. I'm taking my politician out of here, okay?
You're taking the politician and the lawyer? And the lawyer?
Let's just say that Cimarron Boulevard has particular interests, so the members, the people who have businesses in Cimarron Boulevard form a chamber. The Winter Park forms a chamber. Everyone joins a chamber separate for their particular interest of their region. They don't all have to be member of Greater Orlando Chamber of Commerce because their interests are much more narrow and focused. I think the best way to look at the Puerto Rican Chamber is similar to that. It is more narrow and focused. It has a very specific purpose for the island and here in Central Florida, not to compete with the Hispanic Chamber or any other chamber, but the state.
But doesn't if Puerto Ricans belong to a Puerto Rican chamber, they don't belong to the Hispanic chamber. Some of the more wealthy ones, or the people who can pay a double membership fee will.
Right.
But will it take members away from either one?
I don't think so. I think that each businessman has to choose what's my emphasis. If I want to import flowers from Colombia, beans from Brazil, they're more likely to join the Hispanic chamber. But if my interest is to provide legal services to people who are transferring from Puerto Rico to Central Florida, then I'm going to join the
So it's a
Puerto Rican
marketing
chamber.
decision.
It's a marketing decision, right?
Okay, then I go.
Isn't that good?
I think that's great. But let me go back again a little bit so that we can twitch this a different direction. I go back a long way here, just like you do. We're both New Yorkers, and there's always been a movement to stop Puerto Ricans from organizing in Central Florida. There's always been a movement to stop Puerto Ricans from getting a foothold in City Hall. Right. There's always been a movement to stop Puerto Ricans from getting a foothold in the governor's office. Right. There's always been a movement to stop Puerto Ricans from getting a foothold in the government of Orange County.
Right.
Why?
Okay, well, now we have to take a historical perspective on this.
No,
the Puerto Rican community here is a relatively new phenomenon. Hispanics in this community have been represented generally by the Cuban community that migrated to Miami. So when I was chairman of the the Democratic Party in Seminole County, I realized this nascent Puerto Rican community, which are mostly Democrats, had a problem. If you became Republicans, the people who had entrenched power were already Cubans. If you stayed with the Democrats, the minority group of choice was the African American community. So the Puerto Rican community was second in the Democratic Party, it would be second in the Republican Party, and to struggle to get some prominence, you have to struggle. Power is never given to you. Power has to be taken, and that becomes the struggle. So those that are in power want to stay in power, and they want to control the levers of power. If you take away a lever of power, you weaken them. That's your answer.
I still can go into that a little bit more. Let's look at City Hall, for example. Okay. City Hall has traditionally not had a Puerto Rican as the Hispanic in City Hall.
Well,
why is that?
Because the outside of the Hispanic community, we all look alike. It's all the same. So it doesn't make any. They're Hispanic, whether
but
Puerto Rican, Paraguayan.
You would think that the mayor would say, "Hey, Puerto Ricans are voters. They represent singly more people than all of the other subgroups together. Right. So it would make sense to have Puerto Rican representation."
Except for the fact that the mayor doesn't have a Puerto Rican on his ear giving him that kind of advice.
That's my point.
He's taking the advice from people who he's had around him, which are not necessarily Puerto Rican, and they're telling him, we're all the same, Hispanic. That's why you may recall historically there was a Puerto Rican chamber and a Latin American chamber. This is back in 1991. And then the two chambers, the Latin American chamber, the Puerto Rican chamber, merged into the Hispanic chamber. When the Hispanic chamber started growing, the Puerto Rican community, although it was larger in far as numbers of businesses, they weren't the prominent bankers and prominent businessmen.
They were retailers.
They were retailers. So the result was that the large business rose to the top of the Hispanic community, and they weren't of Puerto Rican descent. The Puerto Ricans, then the small business owner, didn't really have much of a voice in this Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, who grew very big and was worrying about international trade. So I think at this point, what you're having is someone refocus.
Okay, and you're saying you're going to retire? To me, it doesn't sound like you're retiring. It sounds like you're developing a different use of your time.
That's it.
Using your time more wisely, maybe. So, I go back a long way like you do, and we caught, when we were in the Puerto Rican Chamber, back in the days, when we started, the chamber originally started, Puerto Rican Chamber was really started, we caught a lot of flack for starting a Puerto Rican chamber. I mean, we caught it all people were calling up the employers of the board members. You know,
well, that was actually the second time around because when it was determined that there was a unity of this Latin American chamber and the Puerto Rican chamber to the Hispanic chamber. When it was determined, some point that the Hispanic chamber had grown too big and its focus was too broad for the small retailer, some of us got together and said, let's refocus. And that caused a belief in a division, as if there was some sort of division. Then, like now, I do not believe there's a division. I think it's a different focus. And I think I encourage people.
Well, you're taking a good take on it. It's a marketing approach. You know, it all depends on who you want to get close to in order to develop your business.
Not all of us listen. I mean,
I
want Colombia to prosper and Venezuela to prosper. Is wonderful, but I have there's nothing for me. I'm a lawyer that sells real estate. You know?
Yeah, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce has always been viewed more like a corporate chamber.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the Puerto Rican Chamber has always been viewed as a community grassroots chamber, which is small businesses, restaurants, retailers.
Right.
And that's always been the difference, except that it scares the bejesus out of everybody and I called it, and when we did the interview last week with the Puerto Rican Chamber, I call it the awakening of the sleeping giant, you know what I mean? Because the guys who are now taking over the Puerto Rican Chamber are very professional, very community-oriented group that don't need money from the chamber in order to live. That's a big difference, because up until now, the guys who have been running the Puerto Rican Chamber were using the chamber to make a living.
Right.
Okay, these guys are making a living on their own right. They don't need the chamber to make a living, which makes it a very functional community mechanism.
Yep. Well, hopefully this time it will be successful with a good group, and it doesn't become like a baby Yui, where we're tripping all over ourselves as we try to accomplish it. So hopefully it will work. I think it should work. I said I'm putting my effort, everything I can to make.
Well, I think it's going to be phenomenal. I can't wait.
Yeah,
I think this is going to be. I think in my email blast to the community, I said, this thing is going to change politics as usual. It's going to change the economic approach of Central Florida.
There's a very famous song, "Vamos plantar la bandera."
Yeah.
Well, we're planning to do. I just discussed with the president.
20-foot pole you're going to plant.
We're going to have a ceremony to plant that pole.
That's good. That's good. Sounds like you're really proud of it too. That's really, really great. What's happening? Okay, let's jump from it to another subject. What's happening with Mildred Fernandez has been pushed out of the limelight because of the Casey Anthony case.
Right.
So, how is Mildred doing?
She's doing fine, thank God. And she's holding her own, and she's spending a lot of time with her family, which is when she's rebirth on that family feeling. So that she's very healthy that way mentally. She's getting herself.
Well, it must have been a huge shock and trauma to be at the top of the feeding chain, and then all of a sudden, the powers that be cut your legs off,
right,
and you slide down, and then it's got to be a huge psychological trauma for a person. I can't imagine that.
It is, because you're where she was running for mayor and believed she had that kind of support to run for mayor of the county, and then from being mayor to being ostracized, afraid of walking out because people, take it.
Do you think that was the political mistake that she made, that she decided to run for mayor and became a target of powerful politicians that are kind of that underground institution that we have?
Well, I believe that she was targeted because she was candidate for mayor. Whether that was a mistake to run for mayor, it's difficult to say.
Well, look what happened to her.
Look, but if our politicians are afraid of going forward and presenting themselves as a candidate, what kind of democracy are we going to have? So we have to have people who are willing to say, "I will make this happen. I will offer myself."
When are you going to offer yourself?
Not me. I've had my time. I did my thing. I served the state legislature. I've done my thing. And so, but too, I had mine. I mean, my goodness,
They went after you big time.
They go after you, man. They go after you. And so even when I ran and got elected, well, actually, when I ran, decided to run, I thought everyone loved me. I thought it was the greatest thing, as a sliced cheese, But then all of a sudden, because I declared myself as a Democrat, I had enemies that I had no idea I ever had. People who now started campaigning against me, who only last week
We're kissing you.
We're kissing me. I love you, Tony. Oh, could you give a donation to my cause? Not a problem. You know, but also our enemies. And then when you get to Tallahassee and you start playing the game, then you start realizing, my goodness, both political parties, both Republican and Democrat, don't really care about what's happening in the community. What they care is about the institutions, trying to maintain the majority within there. I realized that I could not accomplish in Tallahassee what I came to Tallahassee to do, was to change and make things better. It's too much of a game. I have no tolerance for it. I don't need to be called a state rep in order to know who I am. I know who I am. And so I decided I was going to play.
You're still on radio, right?
I still do my radio show, and I think, I do a daily show, and I plug myself here. And
well, tell everybody when
I'm on radio 10 on AM station 1030 WONQ, and I do a radio show from 5 to 6 in Spanish.
And that's a community.
It's a community affair. And
question and answer show. Helping
I
people.
Politics. I talk law. I tell them how to start a business. All this kind of stuff, similar to what the chamber is doing. And I serve the community that way, and I feel good about it, and I can say what I want to say. I don't have to be politically correct to anybody.
Right.
And so that gives me the ability to serve without having to do nonsense of politics.
Yeah. Now, getting back to Mildred, is her case coming up, or when is it? I know that Casey Anthony she was like in the front page of the papers.
Right.
Then Casey Anthony came along and everything went away. What is her schedule right now? The schedule of the case?
Yeah, schedule of the case go to trial in late October 24th, right off the top of my head. So it's late October. We have motions still going through. We're still doing depositions. We're still searching witnesses out and taking depositions, all those witnesses. Going to be nearly 100 witnesses, so it's going to be a long trial as well.
Do you feel Mildred Fernandez was set up?
Absolutely. No question about it, and hope to be able to prove that.
And who set her up? Are you allowed to answer that?
No, I'm not going to answer that question, because if I were to do that, this tape will be subpoenaed and it will become part of the official record. So no,
okay, but you do believe she was set up?
Yes.
There's no question about that to you?
No doubt about it.
And that's an objective response, not because you're the attorney handling the defense?
I think it's clear to anybody who reads the record.
Okay. Let's talk about redistricting. We're now in the middle of a situation where there's going to be the new count and new lines being drawn. Tell us about that.
Well, this is a particular interest to me, Danny, because I teach at Barry University Law School, and the topic I teach is 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Right.
So I'm very familiar with that, with the law, how it's applied, and all the redistricting jurisprudence. I am advising a group, Central Florida Redistricting Council, as to what their rights are and how we can get involved. I recently made a presentation to Orange County county commissioners on the new maps. So now what's going to happen, what's coming down here is because of the growth of the population. Florida is going to get 2 additional congressmen. So that everyone gets cleared. Every 10 years we must redraw the lines, because we must have whether it's the state Senate or the state House of Representatives or the Congress, all those districts must have equal size, all right? So to do that, because population shifts, now it's in Mount Dora, now there are a lot of people in Lake Nona, and so as population shifts, you have to redraw the lines. Redrawing the lines becomes a question of art, and politicians draw the lines based on their criteria of how I'm going to get reelected. So if my idea is that I want Hispanics, because Hispanics are going to vote for me, then I try to draw the lines that maximize the number of Hispanics. If I think Hispanics will never vote for me, then I want the Hispanics out of my district. So this becomes a question of, and this is all, it's called gerrymandering, and it's old as the Constitution
I know.
is. But there are certain rules have evolved since 1965 in the Civil Rights Act, and that is that certain discriminatory actions cannot be taken. So you can't pack, for example, all the Hispanics in one district, so yeah, you get one, but then the other districts are not influenced by the Hispanics because they have no Hispanics in those districts. So you can have a big issue on immigration, for example, because if I have no Hispanics in my district, what do I care? I'm going to say whatever is popular to my district. But if I had 10% or 15% of my district was Hispanic, and that could be the difference whether I win or lose an election, I'm going to be very careful about that issue.
So the drawing the lines is actually a bantering in order to ensure that objective voting takes place.
Absolutely.
That represents everybody.
Represents everyone. So what that means, fair districts, that is all in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
And it will result in lawsuits. Every 10 years it results in lawsuits. Since they enacted the Civil Rights Act, it's been in the Supreme Court. I don't expect anything different than this year, because the African American community wants to preserve its seats that it's won. Hispanics are asking for more. The Republicans want to keep the majority. The Democrats are looking to get more. Everyone has a piece, and everyone will be pulling. And how you set the ground rules is all in the game. The game is setting the ground rules and then putting it in place.
How Hispanics going to fare in this redistricting? How do you think they're going to fare? Because the population is increasing, there's no question.
Yeah.
The population has doubled. I mean, we have a huge.
If I wish I had a map, I could show you. But if you take the Hispanic population, you see them also very concentrated. You go from Kissimmee, right, Poinciana up north, and almost to the line. You could almost draw, if you drew an egg shape from Poinciana up to East Orlando like this, you could get the large majority, about 70% Hispanics. So if you put them all in there, you pack them. That would also be a violation.
Yeah.
But you know what you could do? You could take a little piece from East Orlando, a little piece from Louisiana, a little piece of, and then you can crack them, which means they have so small a percentage in
that
each district
they don't mean anything.
They don't mean anything. So that game, it's going to see up to this point, on July 27th coming up soon, the state legislature starts taking its tour, taking public input on how the plan should be drawn. They have not divulged their plan, because they don't want to take the heat. So they're going to sit around, let us all talk to each other, and then come February next year, they're going to divulge their plan, and then we're going to see where the lawsuits come. But how are we going to sit? I don't think we had that much power. So here locally. So I think the Republicans are going to do everything they can to pack us into a district and say, look, your Democrats go there. You elect your one Democrat, and we'll keep all the other districts surrounding that to be Republican, and it'll be mostly white. So I think that's where they're going to probably go with it. And the Democrats don't really want that either, because they want the Hispanics spread out so that they can influence many districts, and maybe Democrats will win in the other districts. But I don't see how much. They don't have the power. The Republicans have the power, so they'll be setting the rules.
Who is the leading Republican candidate that you see right now for President of the United States? Who can win against Obama, in your opinion?
I'm not sure anybody can win against Obama
at this moment.
But I think Mitt Romney will probably be the most savvy business person, because the question will always be, where's the economy? Are you better off today than you were yesterday? People are still hurting. And although I don't think all this was Obama's fault, I do know that the people are hurting. And when they're hurting, they want change. So if you give them a reasonable change, and people change. It's a great logo. So if Mitt Romney comes across as a moderate agent of change for pro-business, he may have a shot. But if you go off with a passionate, right-wing, Christian, cross-bearing, right-wing Republican, they won't win.
Let me ask you something. I've had a little experience more recently when I went to deal with my plate in the state legislature. How do you feel about lobbyists? That you went up there, you actually were there as a state rep. How do you feel about whether lobbyists should exist, how they influence the political process? How do you feel about that?
Well, lobbyists really, it's a constitutional right. It's a First Amendment right. They have a right to address their legislators. So I believe that this is a right of lobbyists. I am upset about the amount of money that it costs to run. When I ran for the state senate, it was more than $600,000. I mean, this could not be done with a poor guy running out of my pocket. I'd have to get parties. So when I get support, then you start looking at what do you need to help me, and then inevitably you start looking to how can I help you rather than what is the right thing. So I oppose the inordinate influence of money. But unfortunately, I'm a First Amendment person. I do believe that's the right. And so if you want to spend every dollar you have, because you're so passionate about your cause, that you would give it all to Mitt Romney or to Barack Obama for that issue, then I think you have the right to do it. I think we could change it, Danny. I think the answer is, to get short to it, the answer is that we should be able to give as much money as you want, but you can't spend it. In England, for example, when they call parliamentary elections, you have 4 months to run. Here, it's 2 years. And that's why you need $1 billion. Obama is going to have to raise $1 billion.
Why don't we do public funding and take all of that loose money out? Because you know what?
It's too much. It sounds too much like a communist.
It sounds it, but you want to know something? That means that a guy who's a school professor can run. He'll run on a platform. He won't run on political connections and political support.
They'll always find a way because, as you know, there are 523 groups. These organizational lobbyists will open up another corporation and say, I'll run my campaign on my issue. You know, pro-abortion or pro-baseball or whatever it is, and they'll spend the same amount of money. Even if I don't give it directly to the candidate, I'll spend it indirectly. The answer is not limiting, in my opinion, not limiting the amount of money that's given to the campaigns, but how they spend it. So if you only have 4 months to spend the campaign, you can raise $1 billion, you can't spend it. And so therefore, I think that will cut down the influence.
Right, that's a good point. To make campaigns start 120 days.
120 days.
Do you think somebody can spend $500 million?
No, I don't think they can spend it. So I think that's the answer. You know, now unfortunately,
the media is going to lobby against that.
Exactly, the media will never allow it because that $1 billion is being raised is going into their pockets.
Exactly.
So the media is a lobbyist too, and they won't allow it.
We're in trouble. Whichever way you turn, we're in trouble. This is the license plate that we just had passed the state legislature. It is the 500-year anniversary commemorative license plate for the Hispanic community. 500 years ago, Ponce de Leon landed on the Florida coast, on the peninsula, which he named Florida. Most people in Florida don't know that Hispanics have been here for almost 500 years, 250 years before the Declaration of Independence, and that the word Florida means flowers. And the word Florida came from a Hispanic who actually named the state or the peninsula of Florida, Florida. This plate is available for all Hispanics to put on their car and to celebrate the 500-year anniversary. It says since 1513 right on the plate, and you can get it down at your local tag office, which all the tag offices are promoting this plate except for Osceola.
How about that?
Osceola has the largest percentage of Hispanics in the state, and we can't go in and put out a banner or a brochure where Orange County, Seminole County, Hillsborough County, Miami-Dade, but Osceola, which has a huge population, over 50% Hispanic, does not want Hispanic banner in their tag office.
It's getting a little sensitive over there.
I think that, you know, if it's an elected position, hey, we got something to talk about. So get your plate, and all of the money, 90% of the income from this plate goes back into the community through a grant council, which is a special group of people, an independent group of people that has been put together, and they decide who gets the money and the revenues from the plate. So it's a great plate, great idea. Support your community by getting this plate. Also, we want you to tune in to Tony's show. Tony, when is that show again?
Every day, Monday through Friday, from 5 to 6 p.m., 10:30 a.m. on the dial.
Now, our audience is bilingual Hispanic, so I can tune into your show and I understand it.
Right.
Just like there was a survey that I read that over 80% of the people in Central Florida who are Hispanic are bilingual. Right. So you got a huge audience that can go both ways. They come over to me and say hello to me. They come over to you, say hello to you. Also, Tony, I want to thank you for being here. You gave us a lot of enlightening information, you know, like you always do. The Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce, if you are a small businessman and you want to join the chamber, please do so. This is Danny Ramos from Hispanic Speak Out TV. We're here every Tuesday, 9:30 p.m. on Bright House through the courtesy of Bright House. This show has been on Bright House for 8 years, and they support us as a sponsor. And we'll continue to be here. Thanks, Tony. We provide good information by having terrific guests like you.
Thank you very much, Danny.
It's my pleasure, man.
Pleasure.
Okay. Seguimos hablando.